Welcome to Metanoia Mon Amour, a series of meetings created by Nicholas Gada Thompson, my human clone. Throughout this series, and while touching on passages from his eponymous book, we will explore different themes, both contemporary and ancient, thus paying tribute to the lost art of conversation. In this episode, we have Milo Pignataro, an empathetic and conversational guy, a radio man, producer, present father, and a great dreamer. Together with Tommy Borda, they created Fona, one of the most important podcast production companies in Argentina.
The book Metanoia, Mon Amour. I don't know which camera it is, but well, here we are. It's a book that I made during the pandemic. You already know that. It's a book that... The latest elevator pitch I am using is a book of Yamanic and scientific, historical and philosophical dissemination, whose premise is the concept of integration, and the invitation is to metanoia. In other words, which is the metaphorical translation of metanoia, an excursion into the unknown. To immerse ourselves, to delve into the depths of different topics, things that interest us, through conversation. Well, the book itself is full of quotes, it is full of themes, because of course the topic of integration, the concept of integrating opposites, integrating ideas, integrating knowledge, integrating attitudes, integrating cultures, ways of seeing life, it's very broad, it's tremendously broad. So I've been able to have fun talking about all the topics that interest me with a focus on integration, and now we're going to break it down a bit. I want to take this opportunity for us to talk a little about all these topics in general, but the basic one, which has to do with the podcast. And by the way, I should mention that this is the first time I'm doing a podcast. You're debuting with me, Nico. What does it feel like? It's as if it's going to be the first time, and it will be with affection, totally, of course. I am very well accompanied. It will be very well taken care of. I feel very comfortable with you. And I should mention that Milo is part of the duo Fona with Tommy, who are the producers of the podcast. So I am discussing the first chapter, which will probably serve as the first chapter in the sequence. Nothing more and nothing less than with my producer, which is a great pride for me. I'm considering whether to speak to the camera or not. I don't know. It seems to me that...
Feel it, Nico, feel it. I like to break and get closer to you. Yes, totally.
I like it. It's like a kind of complicity and all that. I've been thinking about it, guys. I, again, insist this is new for me. So let's see how it turns out. Today, without a doubt, we are iterating everything. Just 5 minutes ago, we set up the staging, of which we were all very pleased. Well, thank you, Vicky, for that as well, since you are the producer behind the scenes. I was telling you, Milo, that I wanted to start with nothing less than a quote. This is a cliché for us, but it remains interesting. And I couldn't care less that it's a cliché. By the way, you can curse, speak however you want. You have no problem. Thank you. Let's start with a quote from Borges. It goes like this. About 500 years before the Christian era, the best thing recorded in universal history occurred in Magna Graecia, the discovery of dialogue. He is a boss, faith, certainty, dogmas, anathemas, prayers, prohibitions, orders, taboos, tyrannies, wars, and glories overwhelmed the world. This is what he says here. Don Jose Luis, some Greeks acquired, we will never know how, the unique custom of conversing. They hesitated, persuaded, disagreed, changed their minds. Without those few conservative Greeks, Western culture would be inconceivable. I see that we are good, right? With the audio, here, there, with the little microphone. Let's see. And then I will close and pass the word to you with a summary of what I interpret Borges is saying. The first thing I wanted to say, and it's written in the book, but I will paraphrase it, is that you can't say that the Greeks invented conversation. It's like, wait man, there are cavemen in the mix who are currently uncomfortable in their graves. I can't remember how the expression goes. You can't tell me they are the Greeks. At some point, it says who knows how. I mean, it says a custom acquired, who knows how, which means it gives a hint. Well, wait, It's a custom that in any case they magnify, but it is not their own. Now, I'll close the intro with this so we can start the ping pong with the back and forth. As Fantino says, Don Borges focuses on the conversation, which helps to dismantle what overwhelms us. What do you think about that?
I'll throw it at you like this. Let's see what you associate it with. At first, I like to start like this, Nico, because of the mystery it generates. Also, the conversation and the dialogue. Here it goes. There is something for me that is super primitive that doesn't start in the word. It doesn't start in what phona is. It starts precisely in what sounds. It starts before. We begin to dialogue and converse from the moment we see each other, from the moment we analyze each other, and then the back and forth begins. At least that's how I experience it, and I think what's interesting, beyond what is built in that back and forth, is how it is constructed, right? What is happening? Because ultimately I insist, it is my vision. Every time I have a conversation, look at what I'm going to tell you. I'm dropping a bomb right from the start, but I'm telling you the truth. Every time I converse, I understand that for me, that is my weapon of mass seduction. Beyond the voice, there is the question that someone might say, I am a speaker, I am registered, I have worked on my voice, I also work on my voice in singing to seek harmonies, to see the limits that my voice has. The musical part, the sound part, the technique is covered. But you are referring to something deeper, to what happens in conversation, in having a conversation, and effective communication. Exactly. Ultimately, I believe that this reveals almost everything to us. We converse. With a purpose, you can have conversations that are merely nostalgic, which just go on all the time. But there is something, the magic, that is generated in situations like this, even with the trust and with how well we know each other, that there is always a new proposal.
There you go. You are hitting several nails and opening various doors just as expected. First, the podcast. The phenomenon of the podcast. The phenomenon of streaming as well, radio, which is no longer an invention of the podcast, but this ability to produce and then witness as an audience a deep conversation, or one that attempts to be deep in this format, where you can consume it, pause it, and come back later, seems wonderful to me. But let's go further back. I mean, the conversation among friends. So the conversation among people who care for each other, who respect each other, who admire each other, where active listening is guaranteed. As I see it, it's like when you have two musicians, one playing the guitar and the other playing the piano, and they are jamming. It's a jam, it's an ensemble, it's an improv, where clearly the sum of the parts results in something greater than the sum of the parts, where the construction, well, then there is many details. Mine goes more on the technical side. I don't have a broadcaster's voice. In fact, as my dad used to say, I have a potato in my mouth, so I have some modulation issues and such. I'm going to try to do it more. I'm going to insert a parenthesis about something that I also love, which are fun facts and the things you learn that stick with you. Did you know that the voice is like a fingerprint? That no two are the same?
So they might look alike.
I didn't know that, but it doesn't surprise me. It makes sense.
Well, when I heard this from my speech therapy teachers during my training as a broadcaster, there is actually a speech therapist named Deborah Gutkin, whom I recommend constantly. I think this is also good in terms of dissemination, always those little bits of information. Well, I learned a lot of things from her, but among them, that is an added value even for the difference. Why? Because I have experience training people in voice work, or working with different individuals, and I have found many times that people say, I don't like my voice, or I listen to myself and I don't think I have the voice for radio, I don't have the voice for podcasting. Your voice is perfect for whatever you need to do, it's very clear. And has identity. It has something very distinctive. I appreciate it. It's a compliment that extends to everyone, in the sense that I think it relates to issues of ego, insecurity, and self-esteem.
In other words, we can venture into those territories where there is fear of success, fear of failure, which combine along with the themes of grandiosity, humility, and false humility. Someone out there says, I'm not cute, so that they can tell you that you are cute, and so on. What I'm getting at is, and as you say, it's a technique. One learns to modulate the voice, to refine it. Of course, to project it, yes, of course. One also learns to construct sentences in written words. Well, back to it, it's all about trades, and that is the wonder of being human, always busy and attentive, and, let's say, the attitude of constantly challenging yourself to achieve greater things. In the conversation, what happens is that there is a kind of underlying objective to build something new, to generate among the two or three of us, whoever we may be, an epistemology, a worldview, even simple ideas that go beyond what each one had to offer in advance. But also the conversation, and I will see if I can manage to generate. This is the same in a podcast format, which happens to me all the time with my friends in a gathering or whatever, in a bar or whatever. The theme is that the conversation does not have an end in itself. There is no end in itself. The conversation is like tennis. Tennis, well, you can talk about it as much as you want if you win sets and whatnot, but you're going to play tennis with Pepito every Tuesday, and it has no end. I won against you, you won against me. That's not the end. The end is going to play. It's the dialogue, that dance you have with the other. Well, in conversation, it's the same. That's why I brought you The One by Borges, as a way to inaugurate this idea of thinking about the art of conversation. I imagine we will take it slowly, and in each of the episodes we will have some comments. I would also like to hear what others will think.
It's a topic. Because it's a super universal theme in which we are all involved. The idea of exchanging. Yes, I also want to take the opportunity to add something about our history in the podcast. My personal story is that I come from 20 years of radio and several years of television. Tommy, my partner at Fona, comes from television and the audiovisual field with his producer, etc. The pandemic was a breaking point for many of us. For everyone, I believe it was one of the themes we have discussed in so many other meetings we have had that really changed a lot of things we were seeing, some of which we are now discovering and others that we will discover in the future. At that moment, several things coincided for me. I was turning 40, we were in a pandemic, my son had just turned 3, and he was starting to have a disrupted education. There were a lot of things that also contributed to the dialogue and to life itself. I was doing radio from home in the living room of a small apartment in Palermo, asking for silence, a total dystopia. But what happened at that moment for me, which was critical, led me to a new search that resulted in the podcast. I tell you all this because during that time of going out little and meeting few people, unfortunately, I barely saw my parents due to the fear that situation generated. There was one person I really wanted to meet in person, even though I could have done it virtually, and it turned out to be FS, Facu Soler, who is now one of the most important regional producers for Spotify. Look, he is Argentine. He worked here in a lot of media, and Spotify is calling him. I got together with him because I needed validation. Why? Because for me it was about taking a leap in my own story with all those fantasies that arise in new projects, and hey, it must be this way, right? But very transcendental because in the test you can try everything, but for me it represented the need to score a goal in my life. My goal was that an online radio, a production company, something.
Sure. Yesterday I was listening to two Galicians who were saying it in English, the concept of all in, right? I mean, to fully immerse yourself in something.
Totally.
So tell us a little bit. You come from the radio.
Yes, 20 years of radio, I did everything. I worked with everyone.
But let's say, in the leap, what were you replacing? Or where were you coming from at the moment of the pandemic when you said, hey, I'm going to tackle the topic little by little?
I was feeling a bit defeated by a routine that was consuming my mind, which was exactly what I wanted to escape from. For me, the radio has always been a blank sheet every day. both in the past and historically, and a new proposal and a conversation. The interview has always been what I liked the most and what I enjoyed the most. That's how I did everything. But what happened to me? I found myself at that moment super overwhelmed with bad news, with numbers, with death, with a horrifying burden, with something that And what did I start to do anyway? I started to turn things around. And that's when the idea of starting to produce, direct, or generate content for others appeared, which was also a revelation for me, stepping away from the microphone. And at that moment, which was somewhat the twilight of that stage of my life when I was 20 years old, what I did was try to give space to the dissemination of people whom I believed were good and positive for that time. And I spoke with a dancer and I spoke with I don't know, I can name a bunch of people, but at that moment,
I was trying to create a sort of program called Otra Galaxia, which was a kind of galactic show, like that section of people who would throw out at least one piece of reality because there was, as usually happens, a lot of fake news, a lot of nonsense, and many nightmares like that. A lot of wild ideas. But the wild ideas are another thing, especially fake news. One of the things I realized throughout my career, Nico, is the power you have in public opinion when you have a microphone and a platform that reaches people and you can do anything. Yes, exactly. Well, that's the danger. Or let's say, yes, it's the danger of the misuse of the tools and the power that an audience gives you. The other day I was listening to one of the marketing experts, whose name I can't recall right now, but he's a mega foreign guy who appears in Borges. And he said, look, two things. Today, in marketing, what pays off, what pays best is personal branding. Let's say where it is most worthwhile to invest as a professional, as a creative, is in personal branding in the sense of this relationship with the audience, with the community that you are generating. And he said it in terms of a business or a way of making a stable living over time, something profound with the potential for depth in whatever it is that you are going to offer. Let's say, and the other thing I was saying was, well, this personal brand, everyone out there seems like cliches, right? Obvious things. Having something to say, for sure. I mean, no, that's not enough, dude.
one can have fun with the viral dance with the abs, as the crazy guy used to say, but if you don't have something to say or something to ask, well, totally. What happened to me in that break was that this blank page that was constantly being updated or rewritten was always the same, and it fell into a repetitive issue, like Groundhog Day in Buenos Aires, 30 degrees, the temperature, cold, hot, I don't know, always the same. The next day was somewhat the same. I even fell into filler words. And things I said, let's say, I always escaped from this and fought my greatest battles.
Yes, about the circular algorithm, about the routine, because one thing is the routine. You will prepare.
Yes, my organizer is fantastic.
Exactly. Otherwise, the content you have to offer becomes routine. Or in other words, it stops being content, it stops being interesting, and so on. Not really, because then there's the issue of, well, you always have to be surprising, you always have to be, now we are, if it's new, if it's different, that's enough. But wait, I didn't want to leave something that I wanted to ask you.
So you migrated from radio to podcasting with Tommy Fona. Fona had already been involved before with a phone call in that personal search. I thought the following. Nico, first, what I was telling you about Facu Soler from Fest, the current producer, let's say one of the successful producers, but at the service of great content. La Cruda is somewhat, let's say, his production along with a bunch of other things. The Last Days of Maradona, a bunch of amazing podcasts, one of the links with many of Amphibia's works. Well, a huge head. He told me something that I will never forget, which was also decisive for me. And there I also understood what the secret code of the podcast was. We give, where was the question? Where was the question? Where was the shite? And he told me, Milo, whatever you do, whether it's a sound documentary, a conversation, a tutorial, an audio story, an audiobook, I don't know. Whatever is done in that format, you have to speak into the ear.
It goes.
And that nonsense for some was the breakthrough for me. And I said, there it is. Why? Because I started to visualize everything.
No, I love the metaphor. The metaphor is spectacular. Let's see. As I usually interpret it, we are living in an era of niches, so you have to speak to your audience. You have to whisper in their ear, let's say. You shouldn't be shouting at everyone. In any case, people will leave and start recommending content, and that's how a community is formed. I don't intend to, well, yes, I don't want to, because I feel like I'm interrupting you. But that's it. I mean, again, this is the first chapter of a podcast that aims to do a bit of the same. It aims to, what did I tell myself? Let's see. It is also true that there are younger people who see it much faster than one does, and so on. I'm not talking about them, I'm talking about myself. I am 46 years old now, and it's as if maybe through life itself I have learned to let go, right? To let go of many things. Among them, this tendency to hold on to everything, right? And regarding the topic of the audience now more than ever, which I have been pondering for a while, the issue of niche audiences is more relevant than ever. Therefore, invest in your personal brand, invest in having something to say, and being authentic. That is the third leg, totally. Being authentic, all cliches. It's like the thing about whispering in the ear. They are cliches, but no one does it totally and achieve. Because that is the trick, achieving authenticity in a performance with cameras filming you, with time, with budget, with a work team. So, nothing, I am fascinated. Let's see what comes out of all this. We have 7 chapters scheduled with Fona. I hope this continues, but well, let's see what happens in those 7 chapters. If we were making progress and whatnot.
Do you know what excites me a lot, Nico? I have no doubt that it will be like this. I talked about it a lot with Tommy. Because if we do a little bit, lift the carpet and see what we had hidden there, the initial idea was for this to be an audiobook, to directly translate the pages into sound, and what we realized with Tommy, discussing it with you, is that there is so much more here. So it's a way to approach the book's content in a different way and nurture it. One thing will coexist with the other. The book in the podcast is a relative, it's a working tool. Here I have noted things according to color, depending on the guest I have. Well, let me show you. So look at the difference. This is my camera. Look at how Nico has everything marked with his post-its there, by color. I am the pink one. He pointed that out to me a while ago. I don't mind the color. Look at the difference. I have marked real things with a napkin. This probably was left over from some quick breakfast I made for my son. Please, if I haven't marked the book with a napkin, well, I marked a lot, but there's another thing, how one approaches the book, because now we are talking about communication. We are talking a bit about this connection we have, which is the podcast. But I was blown away by what was happening in that universe, that world that generates a tab that I told you about. There are things, or octopuses, or which was my son's first word. You see how you start to resignify things. For me, I am also in a somewhat mystical stage, right?
And I am always attentive to those messages from the cosmos. Yes, I really mean it. Yes, yes, yes. The first word, well, speaking of which, do you want me to tell you one? I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and of course, aside from mommy and daddy, and maybe, just maybe, grandma, the first word of my daughter that I remember her saying is octopus too. Really, yes, because in a pool, I painted an octopus in a swimming pool. I painted it with darker shades of light blue, that is blues. And then she saw it, and I showed her the dolphin, the octopus, and she said octopus. Well, but you see, there is something. I don't know if, but, well, I choose to believe. I choose to believe. I am fascinated by coincidences. Coincidences are enough for me. I don't need a wizard making rays and saying to this one and this one, I'm going to call both of them octopus. I don't need that, but I am open. Here we found a beautiful coincidence. It probably responds to things that are surely simple. My son was playing with a bunch of toys in the bathtub, and one of them was an octopus.
The truth is that I could have said anything, hence the word friendly. Moreover, what wakes me up after this moment, that's the beautiful part, or the little things that comfort me. Here I am, and I start to think about this like, hey man, there's something behind the words. There is really something behind the words. I have no doubt that it is so, just as some resonate with you or others hurt you.
Yes, yes. And then, well, we have fresh in our minds, because of our children, the observation, witnessing how a human begins to make friends with language and starts to, you see her thinking about the little girl. You see her like the gears. Well, now she is 3.5. Now it's something else. But a year and a half, 2, when she started to talk, you see how the gears are working and you are making associations. And as Noam Chomsky says, or I don't know if he says it this way, I'm paraphrasing and he will surely challenge me if he hears this, but language is, there is a software, there is predetermined configuration in the brain for the possibility of language. And in fact, and I read this from him not long ago, the structures of human language construction, which today there are more or less 6,000 distinct languages, different languages. There have been others, and there will be more. But let's say more or less there are 6,000 now. All have 3, 4, or 5 foundations that are the same, you see. The theme of the noun, the theme of the adjective, the theme of constructing with the verb that articulates, the articulators, the connectors, how you generate context and then deliver the punchline or whatever it may be. I am summarizing the science of linguistics and philology in 2 sentences. But it's as if we have wiring designed for that. So what you see in the child is not a blank slate that you teach that language exists and then the person has to construct it. No, it's already there. Just as Jung spoke of the collective unconscious, which consists of these myths that we carry almost genetically, something similar also happens with the topic of language. So it's very nice. I recommend it to all first-time parents or parents with young children to pay attention to how language evolves in their children. Well, I suppose I don't need to tell you that.
No, but look how nice. Well, my stage, father. At first, I had a prepared phrase that I repeated often, right when I became a father. My son is 7 years old now. It said that my best version was being a father. Of all the versions one has of oneself, I amplified my big question of who I am or what do you do. It is so open-ended because what do you do? It responds to your profession, to what I do in my life, what I like to do, because among all the things I can be a broadcaster, I can be a cook because I love cooking, and in that facet I don't have a degree, but I am one. I am an amateur guitarist using American tablature, but I am one. I am a singer, I am an entertainer, and I am a father. I am a lover. I am everything. I am a son, but I am also a father. And I used to believe, now I doubt, that my best version was being a father because later I validated what I thought. Nico, I think that perhaps it is the facet that comforts me the most, not the one that is your most ambitious project. Yes, definitely in greetings, let's say podcast, on the radio, the program, the show, the event, the kid breaks everything and it brings the greatest challenges. We are both guys who became fathers later in life because those are 2 different experiences. I have had, and you too, plenty of time to be single, independent, of the responsibility and the experience and the enormous spiritual and emotional nourishment it gives you. Of course, you also feel like an idiot and make mistakes and get angry. Everything you say, I felt too. The first 2.5 years, I felt that way. Now I feel like a super dad. I still feel that way. But let's say I have stumbled over a couple of stones. Of course, that is part of the folklore of fatherhood, which is another fascinating topic. Here, I wanted to add this: the responsibility. First, you have a huge responsibility, which is to give a name to a person, which is very crazy for what it can mean. Aside from that, you have a responsibility that one normalizes, because you normalize breathing, walking, driving, once you learn. But you teach someone a language, you teach them to speak. Someone who seems small, but is immense. I mean, we bring that innate possibility of learning, but you guide them. And at one moment, something spectacular happens, and fathers or mothers will surely relate to this. There are moments when you don't want to correct something that is learned incorrectly because you love how they say it wrong or how they form a sentence incorrectly. Later, you adjust it because it has to belong to a logic. What you bring up about timing is great. You see, my daughter is 3.5 years old.
And besides, the pediatrician endorsed us, she authorized us, because she told us that children up to 3 years old, in reality, I am letting her eat on the go. This isn't about the language, but about the food. They flutter around, and every now and then they come close, and you shove something in their mouth, right? Yes, of course. Chicken pesto, a little potato, whatever. You don't feel it, and don't tell him about the little hands, the shoulder, that stuff. Come on, manage those nonsense. Regarding education, it's fine, obviously, to burp at the table when you're 10 years old. If you're invited, I don't know. But when you're 5 years old, let it be as wild as possible. In fact, I think we are also a generation that, at one point, I keep finding titles for everything. I need them for my life. So, I needed a title for my type of fatherhood.
And I came to the conclusion that I have a fragile fatherhood. It seemed to me that this concept was good, in the sense that, for that reason, I tell you, I don't know if it's my best version. It is an activity that takes me a lot of time, that I want to dedicate a lot of time to, and that I want to differentiate, because you also carry a lot of the legacy within. You see, inheritance has a lot of colors. One of the inheritances for me is listening to my old man in things that I have pending matters and I want to know if I can turn the tables or learn something from it. For example, I should have enjoyed this more. And I say, damn, if you repeated it to me so many times for a way of life that was like searching, son of Atanos. As it may have happened to Spaniards, it doesn't matter. My father's case was Italian, where, let's say, progress was in his children. The doctor obviously, let's say, took off, but he had this thing behind him. He told me not long ago, at your age, I had 5 jobs. I tell myself I had 5 fronts open, of course. I would get up at 5 in the morning, leave at 6. I didn't. Carry bags at the port like my grandfather might have done, but I worked, and I would come back at 11. What memories do I have as a son?
That I never saw him. My dad is also a doctor. There are many synchronicities, many coincidences. My dad is also a doctor, the same. Passionate by luck for his work, and a good father, a great father, very responsible, and the truth is that he has provided us with all the conditions. I will be eternally grateful to both of them, especially since my mother is also a psychiatrist. But I had a more relaxed work life than my dad. But there is this issue of, well, okay, let's do it. Let's do it for the sake of reclaiming our generation. What we can do, 2.0 or 3.0, how can we improve? Well, in our case, let's see. Come on, let's understand. Obviously, let's understand that the other day, I was listening to this person, it doesn't matter who, but they were saying the secret, the solution for... He said it with irony. The solution for feminism is a present father. I don't want to delve into the tricky territory of feminism, but that's not the idea of this podcast. However, I do consider the importance of total presence and the need to invest not so much in, well, wait a minute, you're with a dry throat.
Ah, the mate turned out well for you. The yerba played a trick on you.
Yes, it gave me conflict in the middle of the movie. What I was saying is, let's focus on being. Yes, of course. Children do not need a perfect father and they do not need toys. I mean, obviously they do, a standard amount and so on, but
We bought toys together.
it is true.
In our short time of friendship, we went to buy toys together. Incredible.
But you see, sometimes the little girl wants to play with me. Yes, totally. She doesn't want to play with the little doll for 5 minutes and then go back to playing with the house. Exactly. So, oh, sorry.
In that search for participation that they have, it is also about observing it. Because there is, you see, a type of claim that they sometimes make from the realm of play, and there we can reconnect with communication, right? With the game. That's where you can also see it. Everything combines there. How you can connect with a child, with anyone, through communication and also by playing. If we go back to the beginning of the conversation, which is what I was telling you, I started to get bored with myself. I began to feel fed up with what I was doing. I started to think that I could transfer what ignited my passion for the others, because there were a lot of others who had a different way of communicating, and moreover, I enjoyed it a lot. I started to think that this is how everything began. This whole thing of starting to generate content, to produce content for others. It breaks my ego from a divine place that I mentioned, to find satisfaction, because to say,
I want to bring out the best in Nico. It's very comforting. And when you have the responsibility of the microphone, you carry a backpack with something you need, which is for other actors to tell you to enjoy it, to have a good time just like that. I love it. You give me a lead in for the next point related to the theme of play. But before that, this complementarity, like, what's his name? Steve Jobs and the other one, Bosnia, I mean, the charismatic frontman, I don't know how much, visionary. And then there was the one behind the scenes. In the case of Bosnia and Steve Jobs, it's very much like Don Quixote and Sancho Panza, the one who is behind, but is fundamental. Well, I'm a bit the opposite of you. I've spent my whole life, well, since I was 25 years old. When I discovered my calling for production, that I am behind Bambalina, that I am behind... I will talk about Baco in another podcast, which is a collective of artists that we founded with Gastoncito de la Serna and other people. That is still alive. Nowadays, it is a chosen family. And the theme of Baco's vision and objective was to celebrate by fostering the art and talent of those around us, of artists who often struggle with their inner world and their great creative endeavors, but find it difficult to organize themselves, to promote themselves, to etc., etc. So being behind that and pushing and feeling part of the success or recognition is just an ego trip. Teamwork is important, and the team should feel that any merit one team member has is shared by the rest, instead of fighting over it and getting caught up in jealousy and those nonsense things. This is another thing I talked about with Fes, with Faku, and also with Solar, which I later shared with several others. And with Tommy, we constantly delved into it and realized, has something happened with this of native digital media, especially with the podcast?
I was asking Faku, I said, is there something that catches my attention? It's that there is a really good vibe among the production companies, contrary to what has historically been happening. I was studying, and my trainers, broadcasters, would ask me, what's going on? Don't befriend the other one, and this is real, because they will be your competition. And it seemed horrifying to me.
Well, but there is a paradigm shift there, right? From the paradigm of competition to the paradigm of collaboration in terms of understanding the other as a potential ally.
Well, what Faku was telling me was that, do you know what happened? And he also threw it at me like a title. It's that the podcast industry and what's happening with digital has also brought something to the surface. Spectacular is the spirit and concept of community. Today we talk about community. And you have to understand it as such. I mean, the word community carries a lot of weight.
I believe that refocusing our attention on ancestral peoples.
The end led me to the same thing.
Exactly. That more or less profound, more or less qualified repetition of all of us talking about, let's return to the basics, to ancestral wisdom. One of the great things that this retrospection or focus teaches us is the abundance, prosperity, and happiness that comes from working and living in community. Total, I also have, look, just look, you gave me the opportunity to, because the third pink one that is yours has to do with this community thing, but
We skipped the second one, Rotita.
let's move on to the second one. Why pink?
Let's see.
Because I said out of all the, let's see, I'm prejudging. Go ahead, prejudge because I like it. Out of all the guests, the one who is least likely to feel attacked because I chose pink is Milo. Exactly. So just so you know, it goes to the compliment. Let's go with this quote from Eric Barker. Well, it's a title in English. Let's see. Something like Barking Up the Wrong Tree, right? That's the title of the book.
I like it.
And he says the following. Let's go to the topic of games.
Go ahead.
And we are going to introduce a concept that is cognitive reevaluation. Well, now we are going to see what it means, right? So he asks, why are games, which can be exhausting, frustrating, and very much like work, so much fun, while our jobs, well, suck? Well, he is referring, of course, to work. I don't know if it's exactly this one that we are doing now, but one understands. Why do children hate homework that is repetitive and incredibly difficult, yet they will happily flee from that homework to play games that are repetitive and incredibly difficult? Why are puzzles fun, but doing your taxes is horrible? This is very American, isn't it? This whole thing about doing taxes. Yes. What makes something a game and not just a frustrating pain in the butt? What for? Here's a second part. Yes, I remember this. I read it. Okay. Just like Solar Cowan's critique that personal stories filter the chaos of life, games are simply an overlay framework on a set of activities. An overlay framework. With that structure, things that sound completely boring on the surface can become incredibly fun and rewarding, even addictive. I'm already finishing up there. Therefore, only a few elements can turn the breakdown of your taxes into a fun-filled experience. One of them, and here comes the concept, is cognitive re-evaluation. An elegant term for telling oneself, and here I quote, a different story about what is happening. And I'll close with this, which is a comment of mine from a text of mine. It says, just like ethics, which we have already reflected on, we should have this concept, cognitive re-evaluation, as a subject of study and practice throughout academia, both traditional and alternative, curricular and extracurricular. Cognitive re-evaluation 1.1, as the Americans say. Why do we do what we do? What consequences do our actions have on ourselves and on others? And here come the questions for you. How can we create without undoing, harming, or mistreating? And what story are we telling ourselves? What are the ultimate purposes for which we do everything we do?
It's just that, Nico. We're going to read this in a bunch of papers anyway, and it has already been discussed. We need to break away from the idea that work is a drag. It should be engaging. It shouldn't feel like a burden. It shouldn't weigh us down, and it shouldn't be about being glued to a chair. I've never functioned that way. Never. And it hasn't gone badly for me. I don't know if I'm the most successful person. Probably not in my career. Not even here. But in everything that pertains to my day-to-day life. That is my pursuit. Working with fun people, creating fun environments, humor constantly permeates my life. Irony, sarcasm, and the absurd are what I am most passionate about. Then, of course, there are a lot of obligations, responsibilities, and moments when you start to converse and define issues that are more serious. But even, look at how things are going back to our ways. With Tomas, we defined something from the very beginning. I return to Fauna, right, Fauna. As a production company, one of our added and differential values had to be disruption. But not an exaggerated and forced disruption. Zero. Normal and authentic. And we were going to realize that it would have to do with being original in our ways, authentic, organic, with what we understood was happening, and above all, feeling the pulse of what was going on. So, if we were going to talk to a specific client, I could mention many, but to avoid naming a brand or anything, let's say a bank or an international entertainment company, it would be easier to approach the latter from a more playful angle, but a bank would be more challenging. Tomas, to whom I give full credit for this, told me, that's where we need to break through the most. And it was where I, who came in more structured, even though I'm talking about the playful aspect and everything, I came in with more prejudice. Moreover, one of the presentations, one of the first we had, with a very important Spanish bank that is present all over the world, including Argentina, the Zoom meeting started, and we kicked off a radio program.
Great. I loved it. Just like to, you already take them out of context.
Hello, hello, they greeted.
Yes.
Boom, a program started.
One afternoon, here we are. I don't know what time it is, the temperature. You completely changed their mindset.
And it was not forced at all what had happened. That's why I also mentioned touch and feeling, that intuitive aspect, which is very characteristic of us. You need to start realizing where the light turns on there. But I had just given some courses, workshops, seminars. I don't remember the title anymore, but it doesn't matter. They were public speaking, meetings, and one of the exercises I proposed was the radio exercise. So, based on what I see and what I know, it generates as well. Yes, yes, yes. But it was connected to the fact that Tomas and I had to define where we were going to take that conversation. And Tomas says to me, wait, there it is, of course. I say, you're out of your mind. You're out of your mind if you think I'm going to start doing radio. I have no idea. She tells me that, and trust me, that's another thing. You build a team, I take the risk on trust. Keep in mind that we also went to another very important food products company with there are two very good ones, but this is one of them. We went to a well-known Swiss company. It's one of those enigmatic gossip programs, but I also enjoy playing the enigmatic game, and we came up with a proposal for a sitcom featuring talking dogs because it was a product. I mean, we had to push.
For advertising or for a sitcom.
It was a podcast.
A podcast.
It was a podcast in that format, in episodes that were half sitcom with dogs interacting, and that the product they were now selling, which was reaching supermarkets, accessible but premium and so on, was our way of pushing it. Of course, we put everything together. We looked for actors to do it. We introduced a couple of characters and created a model of dogs that would go to friends they would meet in the park, which included a Saint Bernard and a French Bulldog. Then came the presentation. We chatted a bit. It was a surprise. And of course, the marketing assistant started, and we began to notice that they opened their eyes saying, in two crazy instances, they maintained a certain respect in the back and forth. Which is why we returned to communication, to how they were super kind in the feedback, but said, this is great, but this is a Swiss company. We go with this idea. We have as a premise, animals don't talk. And what happened?
Ready? The format is set for the company. That's why I say the disruptive aspect is great. The radio format worked well too, even though it was less risky. The other one was a blast. The other was spectacular. It was very fun. From a judicious perspective, it was still spectacular. Look, I'm not an expert in marketing, but I remember. You remind me. Speaking of disruptive things, that's Benetton. Benetton started at a time when the concept of minorities didn't even exist. And I don't know what the topic of mixing different ethnicities, races. Races do not exist, but well, you understand me. What can I say, well, or dab with? The ladies who have more relaxed waists, let's say that too. And I'm going to say, the first idiot of dab, I say, who must have seen it. In fact, no, not this. And he must have had to convince them and such. How are we doing, Vicky? 10 minutes. Hoshi. And you take a risk, you know? And in the end, you have that proposal to reinforce with another client. But well, the topic of the game, right? And not only that, because you say, well, guys, you are creative, you make a podcast, you have, okay. Maybe in the world of entertainment, the playful aspect, the product and service are thought of as something playful. But we are also talking about day-to-day life and the backstage.
Totally.
We are not talking about the product or the service. We are talking about how to work. Absolutely. I have had experience, not much luckily, because I self-expelled from the office. But in the office, we need to really push this idea of competing by seeing who gets there first. There is a phrase from Napoleon that is not very cheerful because it talks about war, but it says that soldiers will risk their life for one more badge on their uniform.
For the badge, yes.
This relates to the symbol, the little token in PlayStation. That is that coin you earn when you jump over the thing and level up. It's the same. It's about leveling up, about entertaining yourself. I apply this a lot with my daughter when we have to do something we need to do. We have to brush our teeth. The metaphor of the little airplane with the fork is a classic.
It's spectacular. It's also in your book. Yes, yes, of course, of course. The little one who doesn't want to eat. And you turn it around, of course.
Yes, I touched the little wire.
Are we good? We're good? Well, hold on. Can I add a quick one before this next part about Napoleon? Taking advantage of these minutes, my dad was in the Falklands as a doctor. Today, he definitely has some post-traumatic issues. Just look at him, he has a health issue. What I'm getting at is, surely, other things were at play at that moment and also throughout his professional life, which made him puff out his chest. Are there consequences?
Of course, especially the retrospective, and I imagine, because I've thought about this quite a bit, if you come from a military family, if you live in Sparta in the century when they fought with the Athenians back in the Peloponnese, if you are Spartan, well, or are you a member of the Zulu tribe from Chaka? Okay, damn. Being a warrior is like being a football player or a professional soccer player. In contrast, in Buenos Aires, we don't have a military culture because there are no wars here. I mean, well, we have a past, but it has been more than 40 years since there has been any armed conflict, and we are really enjoying it. We take it for granted, but we live in a very peaceful area, which is something we should also be thankful for. Yes, without a doubt. In fact, here the military has been demonized, so it depends on where you are, the context. Yes, of course. The other day I was reading about how they manage it's really great. I'm not going to remember the name of the tribe in Africa. This is not just a tribe, but rather an attitude that is prevalent in a wide region of the continent. We shouldn't generalize either, but you see, it grabs you. A schizophrenic appears. In the village, let's say, an individual, a member of the village with a schizophrenic condition, and they don't see it. They don't label him as schizophrenic. They see it as if he is under a spell. So the whole village aligns with the protocol they activate. And then there are a series of songs and rituals, and for those who are experiencing what might be a panic attack, we will take it to something more like a panic attack, you know?
That too, but it's great to think of it that way. A Zulu tribe that has a break with a panic attack.
Well, that's why...
Because one thinks of it at the modern pace of a city, a metropolis.
Listen to me. There can be many reasons.
Anxiety.
Have anxiety and stuff. What is that? Are we going to monopolize neurosis? Yes, of course. The thing is, there is cognitive re-evaluation. What story are you telling yourself? Total. You are a psychiatric patient who has to, I don't know how much, take medication, or you are being the victim of a spell from the neighboring tribe, whatever it is. And then there is a whole protocol that gets activated. And here I throw in, if you want, tangentially, because it's a complex topic. And I don't have to force you to talk about this, but the issue of neuroplasticity, I mean, that child or young individual who goes through that panic attack, and the whole village, instead of saying, well, this idiot, send him to a psychiatric hospital, I don't know what, isolate him, which is what we do. No, wait. The whole tribe gets involved, everyone participates, and that creates in the patient, let's say, a whole experience of reception, love, care, and attention, which generates new synaptic networks that allow them to transcend panic attacks. Because it is almost everything. Almost everything that is psychiatric or mental, in the sense of mental health, has to do with wiring, it has to do with the synaptic, and how that is expressed in behavior, in the body, how it somatizes, etc., etc. This is my therapeutic companion hat that I have.
Well, hold on. I demand something from you starting today. Look how strong that is. But I would love for this to evolve within the cycle as this progresses. because you made me think about this situation as well, about everything we have been going back and forth with regarding parenthood, how we see our children, this new generation, and the generation of our parents. Clearly, something is happening today. I don't know if the pandemic has anything to do with it or what, but there is a generation that is absolutely pathologized in a search for labels, which is the complete opposite of what is meant to be said. Let's take off the labels. Let's not talk about the nonsense. That doesn't happen. When you first talk about this, I was thinking about the very little attended singularities, especially in the school environment, which makes the different, the sensitive. It happened to us too. We had no idea. I mean, I fell into harassment. Today it's called bullying. Tomorrow I don't know what name it will have. But today something is also happening from the institutions. If you don't follow that rule, which is becoming increasingly demanding, even if everything seems more relaxed, you'll be pushed out. This isn't the right space for you. Seek an alternative education. And I never felt like a little bug that followed the rules. Masking to death in a bunch of circumstances, an ultra, mega shy past, my search in communication to break away from this. I started to realize, since I was 8 years old, I have been undergoing psychoanalysis, intermittently, but...
It's great, yes, but actually it doesn't fit into the 5 minutes we have left.
No, I mean, we have to close.
But let's start to wrap up. And I'll close with this opening. Let's say we are living in a moment where, well, every era gives the protagonist the feeling that the time is pivotal, that it is a time of transition, and that is legitimate and it's great. We have more than enough arguments to think that. So I will limit myself to what we think and feel beyond how truly exceptional this time is. But we live in a time of, let's see, starting with the climate crisis, which are all issues that address, yes, of course, the advent of singularity understood as AGI, or worse, artificial consciousness, as the epitome of artificial intelligence. The nuclear threat, the geopolitical quilomos, where all these relics of the 20th century are measuring themselves. Girls with their tanks and their little rockets breaking the ball, that the NATO, that the other, the Putin, who is a mess because everything is intertwined with everything I mentioned before. We live in a time where we are really hyper-connected, and we also have little planes going back and forth, meaning the planet is a global village. Then we can debate whether globalization is good or bad. In fact, there are various perspectives. I discussed this with one of the other guests, but we are living in an era where, on one hand, there is a feeling that we are all conversing with each other, the modern with the ancestral, the Eastern with the Western. I experienced this more than ever in Bangkok, which is also for another chapter, but let's say Bangkok, the most globalized city on the planet. I throw that out there. So on one hand, there is global joy, and on the other hand, the change, let's say the probably most powerful revolution we have pending today is the revolution of consciousness, which is already here. It is emerging. There is already some of it, but let's say it is an individual work that later expresses itself in the collective. So on one hand, there is the internal dialogue, and on the other hand, there is the dialogue of the global village. And that brings a lot of dichotomy, a lot of insecurity, uncertainty, different proposals. So we live in a world that is as if we have shaken the snow globe, you know. We shake the crystal ball, and all the little snow cups are until it settles again into the next thing that I believe that at this point in the game, I don't know if there will be a chance for it to settle, but at least let's see if, let's say, what is that? There are patterns. If everything goes to hell, if collapse occurs, another topic I touch on in the book, collapsology, the fact that systems collapse to the point where they cannot recover, whether it's ecosystems or the economic system or multiple systems.
Yes, communication itself. Does it collapse the community? The communication as we are carrying it out?
There are points that we really don't know what will happen if Sam Altman and his buddies at OpenAI achieve AGI. It's not even necessary to have artificial consciousness with AGI, which is general artificial intelligence that is the goal. And technically it is possible. The other aspect we still don't know. But if that happens, there are different, well, if everything goes to hell on an ecological level, there are abysses that we cannot handle. But if everyone manages, maintains, or we can pilot it, which is like the other option, right? That, well, we navigate all the obstacles, let's see what happens behind. Not now. And we can close if you want with this and with whatever you want to say, but I'll close with this. Right now we are entering. This is a metaphor from one of the CEOs of the mega tech companies in Silicon Valley. I don't remember who. It doesn't matter. We are entering a bank of fog. We are in a bank of fog. We are in a fog, in a bank of fog. We don't really know. Totally. You can see the next 15, 20 meters. You're driving the little car kind of. We're there, and we're all there. So it's a moment, yes. That tension is palpable. Yes. And it opens the door for you to go this way or that way or that way. It is a good time to reinvent yourself, to re-signify yourself, to re-dignify yourself, and to make this cognitive re-evaluation of who you are and what you are doing. That's why hugs will be key. I love it. Shall we close with that?
Well, I loved it, and I'm going to keep reading the book. I told you it's located it's at the head of the chamber. That reading, that's the good thing about it. It has a friendly reading. You go wherever you want, and for as long as you want. I say thanks to you. We made the first podcast, Open the Frame, because we are going to hug. Are we hugging from below or from above?
This was Metanoia Mon Amour, the era of integration. To learn more about this cycle and find out what's coming next, subscribe and hit the bell hard. Namaskar, cheers, and good luck.